Hi, my name is Scott Robert Lim, and welcome to Concept to Completion. Great images are strong in these four areas: composition, lighting, posing, and post processing. This brief video will talk about all four of these fundamentals. Let's talk a little bit about composition right now. I'm using a wide angle lens, and it's great to do portraits where you're using a wide angle lens to capture your environment. I know it's very in style now, especially on Instagram and things like that. You'll see a lot of portraits shot wide open, 1.8, 85 millimeter lens and 55 millimeter or 135, blur out the background and just shoot tight. And so when you shoot that way, which is great, you can get lazy with your compositions because you just blur out the background and you don't have to shoot anything else. But sometimes you want to tell the whole story. So not only should you shoot portrait mode, which is up and down, but you should also shoot landscape, which is wide like this, because you can show a lot of information and you can tell a better story by showing your environment. So look at your photos. If you have a lot of photos that are portrait like this, you might want to start shooting more landscape and force yourself to deal with different compositions and putting more information and elements in your photo to tell a story. Okay, let's talk a little bit also about using diagonals. Here in this photo, it's very good to shoot diagonals compositions, because when you're using a diagonal in your composition, your eye follows along that diagonal line, and therefore you're going to look at the entire photo and your eye won't get stuck somewhere. And so it helps create a movement of your eye in your composition using diagonal lines. Now, lighting, okay? Now, this photo, I had to use constant lighting. Because she's falling, I couldn't have it where this flash I couldn't wait for the recycle time in the flash. So I'm shooting at 10 frames per second. I need constant lighting on my subject so I can make sure that I can capture the image with the proper lighting. And I'm using a Stella 1000 by Light in Motion. It's a small, powerful light that's very durable. You can actually even submerge it in the water and it's fine. So it's a waterproof light that's very small and portable, and I just love using that light. Okay, so anyways, let's look at the photo here, and you can see with that lighting I can create a highlight and a shadow, highlight and shadow, and that creates a depth of image. Okay, it makes my subject brighter also, so they pop out from the background. But I'm looking for that highlight and shadow that it creates, which is makes a really interesting image. Also, you can see highlight and shadow in the clouds. So also, if I add a sky with a lot more highlight and shadow in it, it's going to look believable because I have highlight and shadow on my subject too. And I always point the nose towards the light. That way it ensures the face to be the brightest part of the subject, and it just seems to work when in doubt. Okay, so I put a light on the subject to create highlight and shadow. And another thing when I do in post-processing is I do this little trick where I actually lower the exposure so I can see what needs to be brightened up. And so you can see as I lower the exposure, look at the clouds, look how awesome they get. Right? So I would love this sky right here, but if I were to lower that exposure, then it makes all these other things dark, right? And so this tells me what I need to brighten up. So I'll bring it into Photoshop. I have this action where I lower the exposure, and then I just take and I brighten up these areas where it's too dark, right? And I'll brighten everything up. And so now I when I lower the exposure of the picture, all the dark areas are brighter, and so I can get a darker sky, but I won't make my subject too dark, or I won't make these areas too dark where there's no detail. A great photo has detail in the darks, and it also has detail in the lights. Okay, so here it is, bringing it into Photoshop. And so now I made things darker and richer in tone because I brightened up the super dark areas so I can make the whole sky darker, and it gives a more of a richer tone. And you can see what I did in Photoshop in regards to the body. A lot of times I just do a little bit of editing where I kind of enhance the shape of the subject a bit. You can see what I did with the hair, kind of poofed it up a bit just to make things. I don't do a whole lot, but I'm just enhancing it a little bit. I mean, the subject probably doesn't even know that it's enhanced, and so that's a good sign. Okay, so I got it into Photoshop. I made it richer. I added this sky in here. I have to make sure that these tones match. And again, like I said before, when you add a sky, the highlights have to match the highlights on your subject, right? So this tone has to match this tone on the highlights. Okay, and these dark areas here have to kind of match the dark areas in your foreground too. And so that's what makes a believable sky, when the highlights and also the shadows have the same tonality to it, and it can blend together and it looks very believable. Okay, and so that's the one thing you have to worry about when adding a sky to your subject to make it more interesting. All right, and so then my finishing touches on that is taking it into alien skin and adding these lighting effects that they have in their textures, which makes it really easy to do. And that kind of gives it my signature style. I've also in Photoshop gave it some color grading with my own custom color grade, where I kind of take the picture and I give it a special tone in the highlights that I pick out, a yellowish tone, and then I take a complement, the blue, and I put the blue, a slightly blue, in the darker areas of the shadows, and that kind of color grades the photos to have it my signature color grading look to it, to give it my own personal signature style, also with the lighting. All right, so that's how I saw this image in regards to posing. I wanted something that was free forming. Okay, and so I did a lot of shots before this where, they're standing still, maybe they're looking at the camera, and I'm very exacting in my pose and how I want it to be. And a lot of times I want a certain freedom to come through with my shots. So here I had her just falling and I captured it, 10 frames per second, hoping to get something that looked pretty cool. And I wanted that weightlessness feel to it. And so I just kind of had her fall, and then when she was falling at the end, she would like brace her hand against this rock or something like that so she wouldn't completely fall. So I kind of liked that, to do shots where they're showing action and then they're also showing shots where they're kind of posed, but it's good to have both. All right, so that's just a brief overview of the composition, lighting, posing, and post-processing. If you want to look at the links below of that Stella light by Light in Motion, I have the link down there, my upcoming workshops, and if you need to get a hold of me, I have my information there. So anyways, until next time, I will catch you later.